أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغه مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا بني إنها إن تك مثقال حبة من خردل فتكن في صخرة أو في السماوات أو في الأرض يأت بها الله إن الله لطيف خبير. يا بني أقم الصلاة وأمر بالمعروف وانه عن المنكر واصبر على ما أصابك إن ذلك من عزم الأمور. ولا تسعر خدك للناس ولا تمش في الأرض مرحا إن الله لا يحب كل مختال فخور. إن الله لا يحب كل مختال فخور. واقصد في مشيك واغضض من صوتك إن أنكر الأصوات لصوت الحمير. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات اللهم صل على محمد. For the love of our beloved Prophet, a second loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farjah. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farjah. The topic we'll be discussing tonight, inshallah, is the vice known as the vice of arrogance, or what the Quran refers to quite often as kibr or istikbar. And because there is so much in Quran and Hadith addressing this issue and talking about this issue, we've dedicated 2 nights of the following night to this topic, unlike many of the other vices that we covered. You might have come across an individual at one point or another in your life who seems to be showing signs of arrogance, and you've seen firsthand how unattractive it is and how ugly it might be to see someone who carries a vice like this in their heart, in the way they treat people, in the way they think that they are above people, that they're better than people. And not only does this person feel this way, he also makes it known to people as well. So he carries this in his heart, and every now and then this vice begins to show itself, it begins to expose itself. When we go to Quran and Hadith, we find very harsh statements when it comes to a person who carries arrogance in his heart. Unlike many of the other sins that we find in Islam, where the punishment of the sin is particularly defined, when it comes to arrogance and kibr, the punishment and the effect of it is tied directly to disbelief. You will find in the narrations, the 6th Imam, he compares arrogance with ilhad, arrogance with disbelief. This shows that kibr can take someone as far as reaching a point where he in fact leaves the faith altogether. This is the reality of the matter. When we look in the words of the first Imam, we find beautiful narrations because he carried a humility like none other. And he shares with us wisdoms and secrets that we can keep in mind so that this arrogance never makes it into my heart. Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into the topic of arrogance, and we'll do so by posing the following questions. Number one, what are the three levels at which kibr takes place that I have to be careful of? Number two, the second question, why did the first Imam mention that the worst sin that the human being can commit is in fact that sin that he commits and he belittles? And what does this have to do with the arrogance that he carries in his heart? Number three, which verse of the Quran makes it very clear to us that takabbur, arrogance, and making my way into heaven and living in heaven are completely at odds with one another? And it's impossible for someone to have takabbur and arrogance in his heart and still make his way towards heaven. Number four, what did Imam Ali mention about the length of the worship of shaitan? How many years did shaitan worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before he made the famous or infamous mistake that he made? And how did that alter his destiny forever? Number five, what does Imam Ali mention about the fact that he's surprised that a human being can possibly be arrogant at any point of his life? Knowing what he was before he came into this world, knowing what he is while he is in this world, and knowing what his body will turn into after he leaves this world. And number six, and finally, what happened to the scholar who arrogantly denied to attend and speak at a majlis of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, only to later realize that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides to take away a blessing from him that he is being arrogant about, he can do it in a split second. Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into these 6 questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. Let us begin from here. In the narrations, they don't say if someone has kibr in their heart, the punishment is this, the sin is this much, the sin is that much. Why? Because it's a vice that opens a whole gateway to the human being of other sins. And that is why in the narrations, the connection between arrogance is made with kufr and disbelief. So the narrator says, I came and asked the 6th Imam, Al-Imam As-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. I asked the 6th Imam, what is the bare minimum level of disbelief? What is the simplest form of disbelief? He said, Al-Kibru Adna. The simplest form of disbelief is arrogance. They have connected and made a connection between arrogance and disbelief and leaving the faith altogether. This shows arrogance is a very scary thing that we deal with. We have to be very careful about it. And we find in Quran and Hadith that kibr and arrogance can take place at 3 different levels. There are levels and layers for kibr, and then there are ways that kibr and arrogance shows itself. That inshallah we'll discuss tomorrow. The different forms that kibr shows itself. Kibr is not always when someone walks in and says, no, I don't want to sit here, I want to sit there. That can also be a form of arrogance. Kibr and arrogance is not always when a person comes in and doesn't give salam first, waits for other people to give salam to him first. That can also be an example of kibr, but these are not the only examples of kibr. Kibr presents itself, arrogance presents itself in a multitude of different ways. Many times in ways where I think I'm being smart, I think I'm being intelligent. In reality, it's my arrogance that is involved here. Tomorrow we'll talk more about the different forms, but the 3 levels and layers at which kibr can take place, arrogance can take place. The first of those is when I have arrogance when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it comes to accepting that I have a Lord and a Creator. This is something that especially in today's world and in today's society is difficult for us to accept. Why? Because we live in a humanistic society, in an era where everything is about what you want. And this is part of the reason why, brothers and sisters, as Muslims, our faith will never fully make sense to a secular society. You can explain your faith to your non-Muslim friends and so on and so forth, yes? And you should. It's a good thing to do, yes? And sometimes they will sympathize as well. They will understand to a certain extent. But fully, they will not understand. Why? Because you're looking at things from a completely different perspective. They're looking at things in terms of what makes my life better right here, right now. You're looking at things from the perspective of, I don't own anything here. I'm a nobody here. These are completely different perspectives. And that's why you'll find as a Muslim, it's difficult for you to explain a lot of different duties to your non-Muslim friends. Some of them are easier to explain. Some of them might be more difficult to explain. You say, I cover up, I wear this hijab. He says, oh, but nobody's looking. And you say, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked me to do this. It just doesn't make sense to him fully. Yes, why? Because for him, everything is about what is the impact it has right here and right now. You're looking at things from a different perspective. So the first form of kibr, arrogance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can't even swallow the fact that I have a creator. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tried to make this very clear to us. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted us to know that we are faqir, we are poor, we don't have anything. Anything I have comes from Him. Maybe this is why you find when the human being is born, he is born in the weakest of manners. If you look at other animals, yes, mammals, whatever the case might be, when they have children, a baby calf, for example, usually this baby calf has some basic skills. Walk around, do something, whatever the case might be. Maybe the baby of the bird, the baby chick, has some basic skills, for example, yes? When the human being is born, maybe he's one of the weakest of mammals that is born. The only thing he can do is cry. There's nothing else. And from the knowledge that he has, maybe he has almost no knowledge at all. The knowledge he has is the knowledge of himself. Yes, every child is aware of themselves. That's number one. They might have been aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fact that they have a creator, and that's pretty much it. That's why the Quran said in Surah An-Nahl, وَاللَّهُ أَخْرَجَكُم مِّن بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُم, we bring you out from the wombs of your mothers, لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا. You don't know anything about anything. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to teach me, this is who you are. You're that little 2-month-old who can't defend himself in any shape or form. Maybe if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought us in this world with a whole host of skills, we would sit there and say, listen, I knew all of this. No. When He brought you into this world, He brought you into this world with almost no knowledge at all. Surah An-Nahl says. And then, most beautifully, the Quran continues in Surah Yasin, verse 68 of Surah Yasin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, not only when you come into this world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you very minimal capabilities. This might also be the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as you get older in life, He also takes away these capabilities. At the beginning of life, you come into this world empty-handed. When you're leaving this world, in terms of your physical capabilities, sometimes even cognitive capabilities, again, you're leaving what many times? Empty-handed. So Surah Yasin said, وَمَن نُعَمِّرْهُ, whoever we give a long life to him, نُنَكِّسْهُ فِي الْخَلْقِ, we take away from his physical capabilities. Not because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes this person. No. The narrations say, the one who believes his whole life, his beard turns white while he has faith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a special status for him. So this is not a punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah bless all of our seniors, yes? This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminding and showing you and I that, listen, the beginning of your life, you don't have anything. As you get older, slowly those capabilities that you had, we take them back from you. It's time for you to realize throughout this period, you also don't own anything. Throughout this time, you're also not in charge. So this 50, 60 years in between, God is going to give you some blessings, yes? He's going to give you cognitive ability. He's going to give you beauty, attractiveness, so on and so forth. Maybe He gives you some muscles, huh? I don't know if you've met those brothers, yes? When Ramadan comes around, he says, Sheikh, now's the time to pump some iron, huh? Now's the time to drop some pounds. Ramadan is about dropping sins, huh? Not about dropping pounds, but if you can do that as well, that's okay. You can do both of them at the same time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him this physical capabilities, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling him, listen, you didn't come into this world with this. When you're leaving this world, you also won't have these. I'll take these away from you one by one before you leave this world. You might as well realize that throughout this time, you also don't own these things. But it's difficult for the human being. This is kibr when it comes to accepting that I have a creator and that I'm a nobody. Number two, the second level of kibr is when I show kibr when it comes to the teaching of the religion, Teaching of the Prophet of Allah. Now, there were those who rejected the Prophet altogether. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that because that doesn't apply to us. But there are those who don't reject the Prophet of God altogether. They reject a teaching of the Prophets. There's arrogance in my heart and in your heart, and because of that, I never come out and say, I don't believe he's a prophet of God. But I might come out and say, this teaching, oh, this one's not important. You can skip over this one. It's not a big deal. This is a level of arrogance. And there's two ways I can show this arrogance. At the first level, sometimes there's a teaching in Islam and I fundamentally undermine it. I say, God doesn't care about this. Yeah, it's wajib, but God doesn't care about it. It's haram, but God doesn't care if you do it. Sometimes I belittle a particular teaching, both of these. So at the first level, you come to this person, and this person, by the way, might put a very beautiful spin on it, might put like a very spiritual touch on it, yes? Says, Allah doesn't care how you dress. He looks at your heart and the spirituality in your heart. You say, wow, that sounds so spiritual to me. But the same Allah in the Quran said, I care how you dress, That's the problem. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He speaks out Himself. He talks Himself. He said, I care how you dress. But this guy comes, I think Allah doesn't care if you bow down to Him 5 times every day. What matters is the spirituality in your heart. You say, wow, that sounds so irfani, so spiritual. There's just one small problem with it. God said that's not true. God said, no, it matters for me that you bow down. Not matters for me because I'm benefiting from it. It matters to me because you're going to benefit from it. But it matters. Part of my relationship with you is, are you going to bow down 5 times every day? So sometimes with a spiritual touch on it. Sometimes with an intellectual touch on it. I don't know about this one. This one doesn't really make sense to me. Well, did you study this field? Are you expert in this field? If you're an expert in this field, you can answer God on the Day of Judgment. Sure, that's what a marja is. He studied this field. He comes and says, this marja said this. I don't agree with him. My opinion is this. But if I'm not an expert, I haven't studied, then I can't come there and sit there and say, this one doesn't make sense to me. The doctor says he's going to have a heart attack. He said, I don't know, doc. This one doesn't make sense to me. But you're not the doctor here. You don't know. You haven't studied this. In fact, many times if the doctor tries to explain it to you, you still may not understand it. Why? Because there's terminology. He's seen a million cases. He's been in this field for such a long time. Even if sometimes he tries to explain it to you, you still won't understand it fully. Yes? So he puts an intellectual touch on this to undermine a teaching of Islam. Sometimes it's this. Sometimes it is one level less. He doesn't undermine the teaching, but you know what he does? He belittles it. Listen, pray and fast, but you know, if you don't eat halal, it's not a big deal. Yeah, it's haram, but it's not a big deal. It's not too important. Belittle it. I know this was haram, but it wasn't too much of a big deal. Belittling a sin is a form of arrogance. That's why the first Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, he said, the first Imam said, the worst type of sin, أعظم الذنوب, the worst type of sin, and the greatest of sin is the sin that doesn't seem great in the eyes of the one who did it. The greatest of sins is the one who in your eyes is not great. It's not a big deal. It's a small thing. He said, no, this one is the greatest of sins. Yes? And this is why you find the Prophet had a very beautiful analogy that he used. What was the analogy that the Prophet used? He said the believer, when he sins, he feels like he's in a valley. There's a boulder coming his way. He feels in danger. It's a big deal for him. He feels threatened in that moment. He feels like he's in a valley. The boulder is coming his way. But the disbeliever, when he sins, it's like when a fly flies in front of his nose. It's not a big deal, just another Tuesday. No, belittling a sin is a major sin. If I struggle with acting upon any teaching in Islam, and we all struggle in one shape or another, if I struggle with a particular teaching of Islam, make sure you never turn into that person who comes out and belittles it and undermines it. The one who belittles and undermines closes the door to Allah's mercy. The one who says, I'm struggling, opens the door to Allah's mercy towards him. Many sins, yes, let me be frank. If there's an individual, he's Muslim, he has certain inclinations when it comes to the same gender. Yes, people like this, it happens. Okay, so he has these inclinations. He's struggling with it. This is one thing. If he comes out and openly and proudly announces this and says, you know what, in Islam, this is completely fine. This is a person now entered into a completely different arena. So you were struggling with this. Okay, it's a struggle. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understands your struggle. Maybe I struggle with something else. But as long as I don't come out and openly deny it, undermine the religion, this is a different thing. You say, well, it's not in my hands. I struggle with this. Okay, so maybe you struggle with that. But it is in your hands not to come out and undermine the teachings of Allah. That one is in your hands. That one you're doing voluntarily. This one you're not allowed to do. At the second level is kibr when it comes to the teachings of the prophets of God. Then comes the third level of kibr, which is the kibr that I have when it comes to the servants of Allah. And this one, brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very particular about. Why? Because if I disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes? When I hurt a servant of His, when I put down a servant of His, when I go around and give this person that he's less than, give him that feeling, now I am dealing not directly with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is Halim, who's patient. Now I have gone after those individuals who are loved in the eyes of Allah. So the narration of the sixth Imam, Al-Imam As-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Hadith Qudsi, Al-Khalqu Iyali. My creation is under my authority. I've taken on their affairs. They call your family your ayal. Why? Because you've taken on their affairs. You take care of them. He said, Al-Khalqu Iyali. My creation are like the people I'm taking care of, Their affairs are in my hands. So the best of you, Al-Tafuhum Bihim. The best of you is the one who's the kindest when it comes to them. But now you imagine you become the opposite of this. I become the one who's putting down those whose affairs lie with Allah. Allah has a problem with me now. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to let this slide. That's why Luqman beautifully told his son in the verses that we used to start the lecture with. He said, Ya bunayya, a number of verses. Then he said, وَلَا تُسَعِّرْ خَدَّكَ لِلنَّاسِ. Don't be that person who now turns away from people. Who is this guy? Whatever. وَلَا تُسَعِّرْ خَدَّكَ لِلنَّاسِ وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا. When you walk on earth, don't walk arrogantly. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ كُلَّ مُخْتَالٍ فَخُورٍ. If you have that negative pride in your heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have love for you anymore. I have to be very careful about this. Why? Because the Ahlul Bayt shared with us the problems that come about with kibr. The first of those problems, aloud salawat please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad ajil farajah. If I can ask the brothers to please move forward, inshallah, so that we don't have to stop later in the lecture, inshallah. Yes? One more salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad ajil farajah. The third with the loudest of your voices. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad ajil farajah. The first problem with kibr is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran and in Hadith made it very clear to us. Kibr and being a heavenly person, making it into heaven, they do not mesh with one another. It's impossible. A person who has kibr either will never make it into heaven, depending on what level of kibr it was, or that kibr needs to be removed from his heart before he makes it into heaven. Kibr, arrogance, and being in heaven, they don't mesh with one another. It's impossible. Where do you see this beautifully? We see this beautifully in the story of Shaitan. Shaitan was in heaven. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, yes, do sajda to Adam. فَسَجَدَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ كُلُّهُمْ أَجْمَعُونَ. Everyone did sajda except for Iblis. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked Iblis, مَا مَنَعَكَ أَن لَا تَسْجُدَ إِذْ أَمَرْتُكَ. How come you didn't do sajda when I told you? قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُ. He said, I'm better than him. You created him from dirt. You created me from Fire, I'm better. Now, side note, at least Shaitan had an argument. You and I were all created from dirt. We're still arrogant towards each other, yes? That's a different thing. At least Shaitan, you can say he had a case maybe he was making or whatever. La'natullahi alayhi, yes? But anyways, I'm not even created from fire. Still, I make that arrogance in my heart. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something in Surah Al-A'raf. Pay attention. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Shaitan, now you have to leave. فَهْبِتْ مِنْهَا. You have to do hubut. You have to descend. You have to leave. فَمَا يَكُونُ لَكَ أَن تَتَكَبَّرَ فِيهَا. Because in heaven, it's not becoming of anyone to be arrogant. It doesn't mesh with heaven. He didn't say, you know what, you're arrogant. I got angry at you, so you have to leave now. He said, فَمَا يَكُونُ لَكَ أَن تَتَكَبَّرَ. There's a particular form in the Arabic language. It's not possible from you to be arrogant here. Arrogance, heaven doesn't mix. They don't mesh with one another. You know, some things in life, like oil and water, they don't mesh with one another, yes? They don't. They're opposites of one another. It's like Sheikh Mahdi and hiking, yes? They will never mesh with one another. Now, this guy, he wants to wake up at the crack of dawn, go hiking, and he wants to have a smile on his face and good akhlaq. That's not me. Yes? May Allah bless you. Inshallah, we'll meet on the Day of Judgment. Throughout this life, we can't be friends, unfortunately, yes? You, lakum dinukum waliya deen. He wants to wake up at the crack of dawn, have good akhlaq at 5 o'clock in the morning. Good akhlaq is for 8 o'clock onwards. 5 o'clock in the morning, nobody has good akhlaq. Yes? So these two don't mesh with another. Similarly, kibr and arrogance and being in heaven, they don't mesh with one another. This is the first problem, and this is why the first Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he said beautifully in Nahjul Balagha, فَاعْتَبِرُوا بِمَا كَانَ مِنْ أَمْرِ إِبْلِيسِ. So learn from what happened to Iblis. Why? Because Imam Ali said he worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 6,000 years. لا يدرى أم من سني الدنيا أم من سني الآخرة. We don't know these years from where the years of this world or the years of the next world. And for a very long time. And all of that he lost for a moment of arrogance. And then the Imam says it very beautifully. He says, you're expecting Allah to take Shaitan out of the garden that he was in that represented heaven. You're expecting him to take him out of that garden because of arrogance. And then you, with your arrogance, put you in there? That doesn't work. So that's double standards. He will never put into heaven a servant of God with something that he removed another servant out of that heaven from. It's not impossible. Problem number one, heaven, arrogance, they do not mesh with one another. Either this person never makes it into heaven, God forbid, that's that high level of kibr, huh? Or if he has kibr, it needs to be purified before he can make it into heaven. This is problem number one. Problem number two is that a person who is mutakabbir, he has arrogance in his heart, his life becomes difficult. His life becomes bitter. You know why? Because a person who have arrogance in his heart, yes, every time someone does something, it's a big deal. Why? Because he's a big deal. So this guy was walking, he bumps into him. It's a big deal. Now, if he didn't see himself as such a big deal, as a big shot, if someone came and bumped into him, it'd just be, life would go on. But no, someone comes and he hears someone said something about him. If he's a humble person, you know what he says? It's life. You can't stop people. Of course, he doesn't allow people to take advantage of him. That's not what we're saying. But some things you can't stop in life. He walks on, moves on with life. So it's not a big deal. If he's mutakabbir, if he really thinks he's a big shot, now he's got to do something about this. Yeah, he has to go and confront him. And even though he knows, even if he confronts, it's not going to make it better. It might make it worse, But I have to go and I have to do this and I have to do that, I always give this analogy. If two people are walking on the sidewalk and they bump into each other, it doesn't make the news the next day. But if the president is walking somewhere and someone bumps into him, it makes the news. Why? Because the president's a big shot. Yes? Now, if I think I'm a big shot, every little thing becomes a big deal in my life. If I'm humble, I don't allow people to take advantage of me. But it's easier for me to manage. If you want to see this beautifully, See this in the life of Allama Tabatabai. Allama Tabatabai, as much as he's well known today, was not well known during his own life. So he used to walk around in the city of Qom. Not many people knew him. In fact, some people didn't even like him for certain reasons. His student says, I saw him one time outside of the shrine of Lady Fatima Ma'suma. You know that the habit of Allama Tabatabai every day in breaking his fast was kissing the shrine of Lady Fatima Ma'suma. Before he did iftar, he would go there, pray there, kiss the shrine, and then he would come home to do iftar. And he's something on a different level. So this student of his says, I saw him walking around the shrine, and while he was walking, and people didn't care, an old man or an old sheikh, and of course in Qum there are many sheikhs, so they said, who cares? This child came with his bicycle and rammed into him. Now he was old at this point. So at this point he fell on the ground, and dirt all over his clothing and all of this. His student says, I was just looking from far away. How is he going to react to the situation? He says, as I was looking from far away, I saw, before even grabbing his aba, he went to the child. He asked the child, are you okay? The child was a child. He didn't know who he's talking to. So he didn't care. Maybe he didn't even answer his question. He got on his bike and he ran off, yes? Then he says, I saw my teacher. He took his aba. He started dusting his aba. He put his aba on and he walked on as if nothing ever happened. Life is easy when you're humble. When you're humble, everything that somebody does doesn't bother you so much. It becomes a lot easier to deal with. This is the second problem with takabbur. The third problem with takabbur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised a heavy punishment for it. Of those punishments that we find in narrations is that a person who is mutakabbir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment, the same way in this world He used to put people down, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment puts him in the body of an ant, and people walk over him. You know, when we walk, we don't pay attention to the ants. Yes, we don't care. One narration says, فَيُجْعَلُونَ فِي سُورَةٍ. Yes, they are placed in the shape and in the body of ants. And this is the manifestation of his own deeds. Heavy punishment Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has for it. Yes, these are the problems. So what can I do to slowly start removing this kibr from my heart? A little bit of it we'll discuss tonight. The rest of it, inshallah, tomorrow. The first solution in removing kibr from my heart, brothers and sisters, is for me to understand I am very insignificant in this world. I don't carry as much significance as I think. This is one of those things I should ponder on. How small of a being you are in this world. Sure, spiritually, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cares about you a lot. You're a big deal. He created all of this actually for you. But if you look at yourself on a physical level, it will bring a lot of humility into your hearts. So you're walking, in this country, angry and arrogant, and who's this guy and who's that guy? You're now walking in a city which is part of like this big country, which is part of this much bigger continent with billions of people in it. It's part of this earth, like even more billions of people in it. Then you zoom out, you're part of these planets and this solar system and this Milky Way and this galaxy and this universe. And then you taking up a 2x2 space, you're like, I'm a big deal. No, we're not big shots. If I start to think about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in the world, it will put a lot of humility in my heart. There's so many stars and galaxies that people and astronomers and astronauts, they cannot even come up with numbers to estimate them. And then this little human being here, he thinks he's very important. What does Surah Al-Isra say? Surah Al-Isra points to this idea. It says, وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا. Don't walk arrogantly on earth. Why shouldn't I walk arrogantly on earth? It teaches you one lesson. إِنَّكَ لَن تَخْرِقَ الْأَرْضِ. It's not like when you walk, the ground cracks open. It's not like you're so powerful anyways. إِنَّكَ لَن تَخْرِقَ الْأَرْضِ وَلَن تَبْلُغَ الْجِبَالَ طُولًا. You're not also that tall either. There's mountains that are bigger than you. The universe is bigger than you. There's galaxies that are bigger than you. There's 2 billion galaxies out there. Yes? 2 trillion galaxies are out there in the world, and he thinks he's a big shot. That's why the Quran says something very beautiful. And you look in the verses of the Quran never says this person has kibr. Pay attention. The Quran never says this guy is big. The Quran always says this guy is doing istikbar. What is istikbar? When I want to be big. The Quran always says, you know what the problem with shaitan was? He did istikbar. You know, like forgiveness. Ghufran is forgiveness. Istighfar means I am asking, I'm wanting, yes? I'm seeking forgiveness. The Quran said this guy's not big. He acts like he's big. He's keep doing istikbar. Fir'aun wasn't big. He kept acting. He's a big shot wannabe. That's what the Quran says who we are. He said, Shaitan, astakbarta am kunta min al-alin. Did you do istikbar? Are you trying to act bigger than what you actually are? Why? Because really, I don't have that significance. I have to ponder on this. I have to think about this. This is number one. Number two, I have to always remember whatever blessing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to me that makes me feel arrogant, I have to understand God can take it away in a split second. Yes? Very beautiful, very attractive, God can take it away in a split second. Huh? Very smart, God can take it away in a split second. Wealthy, God can take it away in a split second. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet as well, we'll discuss these verses tomorrow, told the Prophet as well, Ya Rasulullah, even you, we can take everything away from you. But you're humble, of course, we don't do that. But even you, we can take everything away from you. There was this scholar, he shared this story, yes. He said, one time, I was giving a lecture, yes. And he said, I was one of those speakers, high in demand. Every event that would come, 20 invitations, 30 invitations, huh? He said, I was going around from one majlis to another majlis to another majlis. One of these majalis that I finished, I came out of the gathering, and this old lady walked up to me. And this old lady said, Sheikh, if you can come and do majlis at our home. Huh? And in that moment, arrogance came into my heart. And I said, you know what? This is beneath me. What do you mean, do home at your majlis? I go do majlis here, there, all these places. Now you're coming. How many people are going to be there anyways? 5 people are going to be there. I said no to her, and I said no to her in a harsh way. Not because I had a busy schedule, actually. Not because I could have gone somewhere else where more people could have benefited. Not because of any of these valid reasons, huh? Only because of what? I said, this is beneath me. What is this? She walked away a bit sad. Yes? I didn't care. I walked on to my next majlis. I went, I sat on the mimbar. I got on the mimbar. Yes, I prepared myself to start. I said, Bismillah. I blinked out. Can't remember anything. People are quiet. People are sitting. Hundreds of people are sitting there. I can't get through Bismillah. I don't remember what the rest of it was. I know it's bis, but I don't know what the rest of it was. He said, in those moments, I couldn't even remember my own name. Until, for a moment, I remembered what I told the old lady. And I said, oh Allah, I'm so embarrassed in front of all of these people. I promise from now on, I won't speak to a servant of yours like this. And I won't have arrogance in my heart like this. I understood. I learned my lesson. If you want to take it all away from me in a split second, you can do it. I understand it now. Then he says, my lecture came back to me. And I began speaking my lecture. Anything that I use to apply arrogance against other people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take that blessing away from you and I. We have to understand we're not as significant as we assume. Who showed this in the best of ways? The first Imam. The first Imam, he had a beautiful line. He used to say, Ajibtu, I'm surprised at the human being who has arrogance in his heart. Before he comes into this world, he's a drop of fluid nobody wants to touch. When he's leaving this world, he's a dead body nobody wants to touch. Throughout this life, he carries in his belly waste that nobody wants to touch. And he still has arrogance in his heart. I'm surprised at this. Huh? This is the humility that Ali ibn Abi Talib carried in his heart. This was the humility that pushed him every time Islam needed help. Every time there was someone to sacrifice himself, it was Ali who would step forward. And on a night like this, it is now Ali who's now sacrificing his whole life for Islam. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sallallahu alayka ya Ibn Abi Talib. Let us take our hearts, brothers and sisters, to the city of Kufa, and now the body of Ali has become weak and weaker every moment that passes by. Ali begins to lose more and more blood, and now his color begins to become more and more pale. And the children who have gathered around him, the pain becomes more and more for them. Every second, Zainab is crying more. Kulthum is crying more. Maybe some of them come and grab the hand of their father. They kiss the hand of their father for the final time. Every one of them wants to say their farewell to their father. The narration says Ali began speaking to his family, and he began giving his final wasiyah. But this time the wasiyah was not about this moral act and that moral act. This one he had already given to Hassan and Hussein. This time he began giving that wasiyah. Every line of it broke the heart of Ali. Yes? You ever have a loved one speak about their own kafn and dafna? You ever have a loved one tell you what to do with their body after they're gone, if they've left this world? This is what Ali is telling his children on a night like this. He told to Hassan, turn to Hussein, "Oh Hassan, oh Hussein, on a night like this, choose a kafan for me, but choose a simple kafan for me. I heard the Prophet of Allah say that the one who leaves this world with a simple kafan, the angels welcome him. He has a special status in the eyes of Allah. Oh Hassan, oh Hussein, choose a kafan for me, but choose a simple kafan for me." And then Ali continued. He said, when you put my body in the tabut and you carry my body, you don't have to carry the front of it. You only have to carry the back of it. The angels of Allah will carry the front of it and put it on the animal, and the animal walk, and wherever it stops, know that that is where I am supposed to be buried. Oh Hassan and oh Hussein, wherever the animal stops, take my body down, dig up the grave and place my body in that grave. But I tell you, oh Hassan and Hussein, make sure that you hide my grave after you're done. Why, Ali? Why should we hide your grave after you're done? Our dear father, everyone wants to come visit your grave. Ali told his sons, no, I have enemies. If they find out where I'm buried, their hatred will push them even after I have left this world. My sons, make sure you bury me during nighttime. Hassan and Hussein are now being reminded of the burial of their mother, yes? Now they're being reminded of the days in Medina. Now they're being reminded of those moments when Fatima was on the deathbed and she told Ali, oh Ali, bury me at night. Don't let anyone know where they bury me. And don't let the khulafa come and do their salat upon my body. I'm angry with them. Now Hassan and Hussein are hearing the same thing from Ali, their father. What did the heart of Hassan and Hussein go through in those moments? Ali said, listen, when you take my body, bury my body and then hide my body, and know that for many years the place of my grave will be hidden. Imagine Hassan and Hussein in the middle of the darkness of a night like this. They carry the body of the one who was the most celebrated Sahabi of the Prophet, the one who the Prophet used to take pride in. Now they have to hide him from the society they live in. They carried the body of Ali until the animal stopped. They dug up the grave of Ali. They placed the body of Ali. Imagine how Hassan and Hussein were feeling when they took this dirt and they threw it on the face of Ali. They took this dirt and they threw it on the body of Ali. What did their heart go through in these moments? Imagine when they began to make their way back to an empty house, a house that was full of the scent of Ali for so many years. The narration says the grave of Ali was hidden for so many years. This is the loneliness of Ali. His grave was hidden for so many years. But the companion of the sixth Imam says, one day I was on a trip towards Kufa with him. And when we were in the outskirts of Kufa, all of a sudden I saw the Imam al-Sadiq came. He came down from the horse that he was on. He began smelling the dirt that he was standing on. He grabbed a little bit of this dirt, he put it on his forehead, he kissed it, he embraced it. I said, oh Imam as-Sadiq, why are you kissing the dirt of Kufa? He said, this is not the dirt of Kufa. This is the dirt of the grave of my grandfather Ali. If they had known where the grave of my grandfather was, they would come and attack him even in his grave. Allah la'natullah.